Okay, quick setup video on Prophet Taker. Since Whispers in the Walls dropped, the elemental setups have gotten a lot easier. So basically what this video will be is showing the new elemental setups and also how this setup that I'm going to show is basically universally applicable to any frame that you want to use. So whether you want to use Volt, Chroma, or even Seren, although on Seren it's slightly different, the setup always stays the same, the builds always stay the same. And the only thing that changes if you play Vault is basically that you probably do not want to use the corvas. But I'll be tailoring the setup in a way that it should work on literally any frame. Getting right into it, let's say I want to play Chroma. I take a Chroma, ignore the shards, they don't matter. And I think it's just armor. We go in here, we put on Eclipse. This is the build I've just thrown together. It's a generic strength duration build. We have Vigorous Swap on here because it applies multiplicatively to Contagion, but I'll get to that in a second. Total Eclipse because we're going to be using a crewmate to cover Toxin, but you can also do that with a Zenith. I'm just using the Ogris. I'll be showing both, but it's basically just preference, whatever you like more. Ogris is faster, but it also is a bit annoying to get the Ogris and it takes some getting used to. And Zenith is pretty simple. I've also put on Streamline on here because why not? You can also just use Ogre Secrets instead. It doesn't matter much. Survivability options for this build. I have Arcane Guardian on here. You can replace this with Awakening if you want. It gives you a bit more damage for your pistols. And since I assume that you're going to be running synth mods on your companion, this also procs from the passive reload from synth mods. Other options include replacing Total Eclipse with Vitality. If you're not using a crewmate, if you are using a crewmate, you'll have to probably either forma this slot or reforma this one so you can fit in Vitality. Or maybe don't forma this slot and put in Vitality instead. Also Ancient Healers and also crewmates help a lot with survivability because they kill all the enemies around you so you don't get to take damage as much. Also another thing about the build, you can replace Steel Charge with Sprint Boost to make the flight a bit faster, but you will probably have to compensate a bit of the damage on your balla, so you'll have to play around with that a bit. Getting to our primary, this is the Ogris. This is basically the only build you can use. It needs multi-shot and damage to one-shot the pylons. If you don't have a good Riven, you can just use it Rivenless and just put Speed Trigger in there or something. You will be two-ticking the pylons, but it will still be faster than a Zenith if you know how to pre-shoot the pylons. The Deadhead is only on here for minus recoil, by the way. There's no arcane that really does anything for Ogres. This would be a very bare bones Zenith build. This needs 2 pellets to hit for it to one-shot. If you have a damage multi-shot Riven, or like any damage Riven in general, you can put it in there and then you can one-shot with only 1 pellet. Otherwise, you can rank up the Vigilante armaments, you can put in Galvanized Chamber, because if you're running Zenith, you will have the chance to kill enemies around you anyway, so you can build stacks. Also, instead of Rime rounds, you can put in Primed Cryo rounds for just more damage in general. Another thing that can also be of help is Primary Merciless, because if you're gonna be killing enemies anyway, then you might as well build some stacks for Merciless, and then maybe you will be one-shotting with 1 pellet. Also, if you have a damage Riven on here, you can just remove Rime rounds and Stormbringer outright. You don't need them, because this weapon's only supposed to cover Toxin. And yeah, that's it. Okay, the diplos. Pretty simple. It's a crit build. It's modded for viral heat. We have a magnetic progenitor. You want as high a percentage as possible, just like with the Ogris. Cascadia Overcharge is here for if you use shield pads. If you don't, you can use like Deadhead or something. But Cascadia Overcharge is a pretty noticeable damage increase. If you want to get a Riven for this, you would want to get a Riven that has Toxin and Cold, so viral basically, so you can free up this mod slot. You can either put the new Radiation mod in here, or put Lethal Torrent. Putting Radiation doesn't actually do that much, because you can put the same Radiation mod on your balla, and that does a lot more damage than it does on the diplos. All in all, this build covers viral, magnetic, radiation, heat, / puncture, and impact, or without the radiation if you decide to put lethal torrent instead of accelerated isotope. Okay, the balla build. This was impacted the most by the Whispers in the Wall update. For one, we got the new melee exposure arcane, which basically gives you corrosive all the time. On the other hand, we also have the new radiation mod. And so basically we can cover gas, radiation, cold, IPS, and corrosive, and blast from Exodia Contagion on one weapon now, which means that the only elements that are still left are toxin and electricity. And toxin we can either cover with a crewmate, or we can cover it with a zenith, or if you're playing Saren, you can use toxic lash. The way we cover electricity is by using Virtuous Surge on our amp. Basically, we combine this with Madurai Void Strike, and every time we see electricity, we go into our operator, we use Void Strike, and we just shoot the shield. This goes well with Eternal Onslaught because it synergizes well with Void Strike, so would be nice to have this. Virtuous Surge is very easy to get. It's a Profit Taker Arcane, and costs a full one costs 50k standing, so do Profit Taker a few times and you will have this. Eternal Onslaught is probably the harder one to get out of these two. Focus School, like I said, is Madurai, with Void Strike being the most important thing. And that's basically it in terms of frame and operator setup. Okay, next up is our crewmate. Really doesn't matter much which crewmate you use. You want one that has as much points as possible in combat. If you have more points to give, you can put them into repair. That's basically just health regen for the crewmate. And otherwise, you can put them into endurance. That's just max health. The crewmate can run basically any weapon as long as it has like good crit stats. I choose to run the Amprex. It has good crit damage, it can cover Toxin if you mod it with Toxin and Magnetic, and it also chains to enemies, so it's a good crowd control. Also, if you have the Railjack Intrinsic Command rank 10, then you can get elite crewmates, and I'd be looking out for one that has the crit chance perk. Other intrinsics that are nice to have are Tactical rank 8, so you have reduced archwing blink cooldown, Piloting rank 8, so you can have more archwing speed, and Gunnery rank 8, so you can have a bit more damage while you're in archwing. That can be useful for pylons if you don't have a good Riven, but otherwise it's not needed. Okay, quick kavat build, Synth Fiber for the passive reload, Reinforced Bond, Tenacious Bond. As far as I know, Tenacious Bond doesn't work right now. That may have changed. I'll put it in a pinned comment if it does. Charm, and Bite to actually proc the Tenacious Bond. Archwing is Itzal. Only thing that's important is Hyperion Thrusters. And the last thing in this setup is our Necromech. The Necromech doesn't actually matter. What matters is the weapon. This would be the build. If you don't have a Riven, just put crit damage in here. But this Riven doesn't actually do much. It only gives me more fire rate. It doesn't actually let me one-shot. So if you don't have a good Riven, you will be either two-shotting or you will be charging your corvas to shoot the legs. The reason we use the Necromech, not the Mausolon, is not necessarily speed, because while the Mausolon does have the cooldown animation and it is pretty long, what really matters is that if you shoot the legs in your Necromech, then that basically gives you additional survivability, because you don't have to take out the Mausolon, you don't have to shoot everything while being in your Warframe, and it's a very noticeable difference. Okay, let me demonstrate all of that now. Waiting for the PT spawn at 8 seconds. Wait, blink to the spawn. Exit early so we can cast our abilities. Throw the crewmate, throw the ancient healer if we want one. There's electric, so we Madurai it. And then we put down our mech. We cast Eclipse. Shoot the legs again. Diplos Balla again. Waiting for a crewmate to clear the toxin shield. Do the legs again. Recast our abilities again. Miss one pylon apparently. And then we do the last phase. Yeah. 1 minute 30. And then, once you see Profit Taker fall down, This is where we place effigy. And there we go. 500,000, because I also got a cat buff. And 1 million credits in 2 in-game minutes, because I have a credit booster. And that's basically it. If you have more questions, feel free to ask them in the comments or in the Discord link below. There's also the Profit Taker guide link below, which you can also read if you're interested. It's pretty long, pretty extensive, and it's also not updated at the moment, but we're working on it. Otherwise, have a nice one.